You so much, Janet. I'm actually living in Fort Smith, as Janet mentioned, and my connection to agriculture and agri-food is that my spouse and I um, jointly run Flat World Alpacas in Fort Smith, but we also have a market garden, and I learned a lot from watching Gabby and also having conversations with Gabby Kohler, one of our speakers, and with France Benoit. I've learned from both of them, and I thought this would be a really great opportunity to broaden out the conversation so that other people also have a chance to learn from both of them the way I have. And I continue to learn from both of them, let me tell you. Um, so, um, Gabby's actually down the road from me in Fort Smith. France is in Yellowknife, and both of these women have inspired me, and they're both really generous about sharing their knowledge because they're successful and they want others to succeed too, which I think is just wonderful, and it really encourages me. Um, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them, and then I'll be asking them some questions. But also, please, if you have questions, as Janet said, put them in the chat, and we'll follow up with those questions as well. So in the 1990s, France began the Refuge Farm, which was at Madeline Lake along Yellowknife's Ingram Trail. And she grew food for herself and for her community. And then about 5 years ago, she moved into downtown Yellowknife, where she continues to have a garden. But she also takes the produce and the herbs that she grows and cooks them up into these wonderful dishes. And I can say that because I've actually tasted some of them.
Yeah, me too.
and and I can tell you that, like,
delicious.
Oh, they are. And then she sells them through her online store. And when I'm not in Yellowknife, which is most of the time, and I look at her online store, I have to I have to keep myself from drooling on my keyboard and on my screen as I'm looking at all these wonderful dishes going by. So she also learned to make cheese, which she told me recently, and using ingredients from the grocery store. So I'm actually really intrigued by that. And she's also the co-founder of the Yellowknife Farmers Market. Gabby Kohler is the owner of Gabby's Wild Harvest, just on the outskirts of Fort Smith. She harvests things like fireweed, spruce bud, and rosehip to make delicious jellies and jams. And she also creates chutneys and vinegars, some of which are in my fridge right now. She also sells her products at community events, at the farmers market here, and through Facebook. And Gabby was a founding board member of the Desmond Day Farmers Market in Fort Smith. There's a common thread here between the two women. So France and Gabby are really creative. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions here. So I'm going to start with you, Gabby.
Okay.
So how did you get the idea to harvest from the land and then make jams and jellies? And then how has your business evolved from there?
The inspiration actually was my paternal grandma. She had huge orchards with cherry, apple, pear, whatever trees, and lots of berries. And as a kid, I had to pick berries and, help canning and preserving and cooking up and whatnot. So that's one thing. And the second one is I live out here, pretty much in the bush. I can walk a couple meters down the hill and I have wild mint. I have rose petals, spruce buds, whatever I need. So it's very convenient and very nice here. So I enjoy that. And how it evolved, did you ask?
Mhm.
I think through word of mouth, more or less. I only sold my stuff at the farmer's market to start with, and it grew from there. But I still only or mainly sell at the farmer's market. I was in Yellowknife 2 years ago. Yeah. And sold there for the first time. But other than that, oh, yeah. And Hay River. Sorry, I forgot Hay River. We were together once. But other than that, it's farmer's market here in town.
I'm curious though, how did you get from, oh, there's wild mint just down the road to, I think I'm going to make some jams and jellies with it?
Because I always did that. Like I had to do that as a kid, and I always made like preserved stuff. Like I have a garden here. I fermented beets and cucumbers and whatnot. So I always canned, and it was just I don't know. It just came to the to that I always did that. Never a question of not doing it, because I don't want to be so dependent on superstores and all that stuff. So I like my own stuff, my own food better, and I know where it's coming from. So
Thank you.
why?
Pons, you started as a grower. Um, what made you decide to start taking those ingredients that you were growing and then turn them into these value-added products that you were then selling online?
It was never my intention to sell commercially. And if you told me where I'm at right now, I would never have have believed you. I think my evolution, to use the word you were using, essentially stems from two events that happened at about the same time. I happened to buy a house off grid along the Ingham Trail over 30 years ago, and it came with a large garden. And there was also an awareness that was starting in me about all the different environmental crises, which can be kind of overwhelming. And it's at some point I thought, what am I going to do about all these crises? And to learn how to grow food became my thing. It was going to be my thing. I was going to learn how to grow food, and that was going to be my solution, the one bit I can do. And I say learn how to grow food because unlike Gabby, I had no experience whatsoever. In fact, I was brought up in a grocery store, and as far as I was concerned, food came from the grocery store that my family owned, and we came from a farming community, but didn't really have a lot of interaction with farmers. This is before markets and all of that. So for me, it was okay. You happen to have a garden. Well, learn how to grow food, and read, talk to people, internet, and soon came to realize that I was getting so many conflicting information because everybody had their own family traditions and gardening traditions. And so it just quickly came to my realization that it was going to be trial and error. And being outside the city limits, I was on a lake and, the wind and all these things. So I just learned really on the fly. My goal was to grow food for my husband and I. And then by doing that, develop some techniques of building raised beds, and techniques on how to grow food. We were on sheer bedrock with incline, so it was, this was not the prairie fields. And then after a few years, well, you're growing enough food, more food than what you need. Then what? Well, maybe we should start a farmer's market. And so you go down that route as if I had ever thought that one day I would be doing this. And then when I decided to sell food, that opened up a whole bunch of other problems. I was outside the city limits on a lease where you're not supposed to be running a business from. Um, I tried to apply for funding to ITI and was told that no, there was no funding for small scale farmers. I was too small. And I said, well, I want to get bigger, you know. So becomes that this is where a lot of my government experience proved to be helpful is just, fighting all the way. Fighting is a strong word, but at times that's what it felt like to try to get recognition so that we could get funding. And I called it my $3,000 shutter up money, but we got that and bought lumber and soil, and next thing I'm selling at the farmers market. Um, Eventually, after my husband passed away, decided to move into town, and I had done employees and all of that. Just wanted to be small scale and wanted to go carless. So I take my stuff to the farmer's market on my electric bike. I pull a trolley. And I moved into town with COVID. So that was the time, contactless, started an online business. There were a lot of new people arriving in town. Um, and for 2 weeks, they had to isolate. So I became their lifeline, like in a sense. So for me, it was not like Gabby. It was not, none of it I had done before in my life. And that's sort of how it evolved is, okay, what's the next challenge? What's the next challenge? So now this phase that I'm in is what keeps it interesting for me because now I can do cheese and I can grow vegetables with my eyes closed. But coming up with recipes on a weekly basis that use my cheese and vegetables and berries and herbs keeps it very fresh and creative. And so that's a nice complement to the growing of food. And I'll leave it at that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of the things you had mentioned to me when you and I were chatting one time was about you becoming an accidental cheesemaker.
It was literally after a long season, I was going to Quebec and to spend some time with family, and I thought, oh, I should register for some kind of course or anything, like and so I literally Google, like training opportunities, January, Quebec, kind of thing. And cheesemaking came up, and I went, oh, that could be interesting. And so it was over a long weekend, so did go. Only to find out that my father, at some point after the second weekend I had gone, my father said, "Oh, you're continuing the family tradition of your uncle." And I went, "What?" His uncle was a dairy farmer, and basically all the dairy farmers were doing cheese making. And yeah, so and the reason it makes it an interesting story is it had never occurred to me that I would be selling cheese at a farmer's market because I didn't think you'd have the right. And I'm walking on the street and I bumped into the environmental health, sort of the health inspector for the farmer's market. And this is coming to Christmas and we get chatting and I tell him, oh, and by the way, because he had told me he liked cheese. Why he had told me that, I don't know. And so I told him that I was going to take a cheese making course. And he looks at me and he said, well, if I look at you while you're doing it, I could authorize you to sell it. And my jaw dropped and I went, really? And he said, yeah, we could work around it. So I get to the cheese making course and I'm telling everybody that I got permission to sell. And the instructor said, no, you don't. Like nobody is allowed to sell cheese made in a home kitchen. I said, oh, yes, I do, from the health inspector himself. And so from then on, she was giving instructions, and then she'd say, "Oh, France, you don't need to listen to this. You're never going to make this cheese. This will take too long for you." So she kind of adapted her instruction. You should focus on soft cheeses and, like feta cheese and ricotta and so on. And so that's how the evolution happened. Never occurred to me.
That was
That's
great.
cool.
Mm.
Yeah. This is for both of you, so I'm gonna start with Gabby on this one. How do you find and find the recipes and work with them? Um, I'm guessing that there's a lot of trial and error in the kitchen, um, but maybe you can talk about that.
The recipes are mainly from my Bible. And this is the Beverly, what is her name? I'm sorry. I,
Oh, Gray?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Yeah. They are mainly her recipes for like dandelion, spruce bud, the wild stuff. And the other ones is just traditional foods that we always made at home. So I know by heart how they go and how they work. But the rest is from Beverly Gray for sure.
Hmm?
What about
And
you?
no, sorry,
Go ahead.
I know nobody else who does it here in Fort Smith, and I just thought that would be a good idea to try that, the wild stuff.
Hmm.
So that's how it came about.
And I learned
What's the
about
name of her book? Is it the Boreal? No, the
The boreal
Boreal
herbal.
Herbal. Okay,
Yes.
Boreal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, for me, it's I've over the years, because I had this large garden, started to accumulate recipes based on vegetables. So now I have this big basket with folders of vegetables and recipes. And by the way, this is the first thing I put in my suitcase during the evacuation. I am not leaving without my recipes. And so the rest was, was not as important. But I've accumulated over the years a number of recipes based on vegetables. I've also accumulated a lot of recipe books from Europe and North America. Of course, there's the internet. But for me, what is most important to do in choosing a recipe is, and I've tried to explain that a few times to people, it's got to be delicious.
But what's the DS?
Like, because I want something that is unique that nobody else, does. So it's got to be good. It has to be with a lot of the produce and the cheese that I make, because you want to keep the costs down. And it's got to be easy. And if it's not, can you make it easy? So a muffin recipe that asks for 3 bowls and the muffin pan, forget it. And and I usually quintuple or quadruple minimum recipes. So I've got big containers and I just throw everything in and I mix with my hands. So it's got to be easy. If it's not, then it's not worth my time because I'm selling what I'm doing. I will spend a lot of time preparing a meal for a special occasion, but to sell, like I need to make some money. And there was something else that I thought of. You need to think of all the items that you will need to do that recipe. So fancy spices that are difficult to get here, fancy products, that's not going to happen. So over the years, you develop an eye for recipes, like I can look at a recipe. Very often people will say, oh, this looks like an interesting recipe for you, France. And I look at it and there's 14 steps. It's like, nah, it's not going to happen. But I'm curious enough to look at it and go, can I simplify this? Very useful as well to speak French, because then it opens up more recipe books and also recipes from Europe and yeah, that's how I find my recipes. And then you try things, and people will tell you if they like them or not. Just because I think something is good and it's easy to do, and that's going to be a seller, doesn't mean, it's necessarily going to be. Yeah.
It's funny that you talk about the 14 ingredients and the exotic stuff, because I remember years ago, I lived in Inuvik for 2 years, and I remember, I think it was Canadian Living had these recipes, and I thought, oh, great, and I'm walking through the grocery store picking, I picked a recipe, and I walked through the grocery store, and then I suddenly realized I can't find half the ingredients. I'm like, okay, never mind. I flipped the page. I think I did like 3 or 4 passes through the grocery store, and then came out and thought, okay, well, I can't do any of these recipes, and that's 45 minutes of my life I won't get back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's actually when I started thinking about being a bit more discerning about like what can we do in the north versus, in the south, where you could just walk down the street to the, some other 3 stores and find what you need. Yeah. One of the things that you just mentioned that I wanted to actually ask both of you is, you talk about some recipes that you like, but then like, do customers like them too? And I'm wondering if you've sort of noticed, and this is for both of you, if you've noticed any trends or any tips for people if they're trying to think about what to make, things that work well and things that don't.
Mm-hmm. In my case, it is very hard to say, because from year to year I sell, like with the jams, I pretty much sell the same stuff. And one year I can't keep up with making dandelion jelly. The next year I can't keep up with rhubarb vanilla bean or whatever. Like it's never the same. Never. It's always a different kind of jelly or a different kind of fermented foods or a different kind of whatever I have. Last year it was the, what do you call it? It's a condiment with all the vegetables in it. And it's fermented and jardinera.
Jardiniera, yeah.
Jardiniera, yeah. And that went like hotcakes. So I don't know. I try it again this year. Maybe I sell one, maybe I sell none. So it depends really on the clientele, I guess, too.
I think we need to demonstrate some flexibility and meet your customers halfway,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and things change. I try to, there's some things that I have every week, but I try to change a lot of, to have some diversity, because I don't want to get bored, frankly, as well. I don't want to constantly be making the same thing, but it's very important to listen to your customers as well. I'll give you the example of yogurt. I think this is 2-3 years ago. I was thinking of things that I could, like in winter is when I test and research different things. And so it was like, oh, maybe that'd be nice to learn how to make yogurt. And so I do that. And then I decide that maybe I'm going to, for the first few weeks of the market, I'm going to have some yogurt, and then I'll stop making yogurt as I get more produce. Well, like you said, like hotcakes. And I was making a very thick Greek yogurt. I had parents in tears telling me that was the only yogurt that their children would eat, and I figured
Yeah.
because it was less acidic. Um, so I decided, okay, but I'm going to give it my own twist. So I would put a sauce at the bottom that was made with carrots and cardamom or
Oh,
rhubarb.
nice. Yeah.
So, making a nice product that way. So giving it my own twist. And now I make yogurt 3 evenings a week during the farmers market, which I never thought. And then there's other reasons as well. I think it's something that people recognize as well. Sometimes I have kohlrabi tatin, and people go, whoa, what is that? And so I think yogurt is cheaper. It's a small container, and it's something that people recognize. And then, they're curious, they come, and then they can buy other things. So
Mhm.
having uh, products that are not too expensive, right, is also good from selling perspective. But yeah, I think that's you got to meet your clientele and meet your needs as well and your passion. Sometimes people ask me to make certain things, and I say, nah, I want still to have some fun. Yeah.
Mm. What are some of the lessons that you've learned about starting and running a food business in the NWT? Um, and what is some of the advice that you would give somebody who's either starting out or is trying to figure out how to move forward?
Hmm.
Gabby?
For myself, it is, I think, keep it small when you start. Don't go into massive production or something like this. And fresh ingredients, of course, depending on what you're selling. But for me, it was fresh, like just picked ingredients. Don't overcomplicate the recipes and just have fun. I guess that's the most important part for myself. Like have fun at what you're doing. Otherwise, it's too much of a business, right? And
Mhm.
the fun goes
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
I jotted down um, a few things when I started to think about the lessons, and certainly like Gabby, to keep it simple and manageable is good. Our first reaction is like, wow, there's, like I can do all these things, but a lot of things take a lot of time, and time is precious. So to keep it simple. And I also remember when we started the Yellowknife Farmers Market, we had somebody from the Ontario Farmers Market Association come and give us a bit of training. And I still to this day remember one of the things he told us is you got to figure out what you are good at. So don't have a stall at the farmers market with your knitting, with baked goods and candy and jam, because people are going to be in front of your table and think, "Oh, wow, that's a lot of things, you know." So what are you good at? Maybe build up after if you want, but
Mhm.
are you a knitter or somebody who makes jam or who makes candy? Like I want to know, um, because being, especially at the farmers market, is you are establishing a relationship with your customer. It's all about relationship. So you want to be able to tell them, this is what I'm good at. This is what I like to do. This is what I watch my grandma do, like so it becomes a story, and people want stories. One of the things that the two main things I would say is right now we have some stock, some supplies issues. So I find that I can no longer count on necessarily being able to complete the menu that I set out to do that week because some items are missing from the grocery store. So for me, that's a big thing. I try not to hoard, but I do, at times I need to on the fly while at the grocery store. Nope, the quiche is not going to be this and that. It's going to be this and that. So you need to be quick on your feet. And that is new. Like I've been doing this for what, 14 years now. And the last year, and I'm assuming this year will be the same too. But the biggest change or lesson, if you want to call it that, is I started to grow vegetables, and that was a big part of my life, and I loved it, and I learned. And then when you decide to sell, that big part becomes smaller. And what I mean by that is because now you need to be the resident expert on starting an online business, on permitting with the city, with the GNWT. You need to figure out your supplies and how to get them, the packaging, the pricing, how to order all of that. So this big aspect that I loved became less, and we all know there's so many hours in a day. So you need to, of course, the learning curve at first, is big. But it does get better. But that was a big realization for me, is the growing of the herbs and the vegetables and the berries was all, I wouldn't say incidental to what I was doing, but there was a big shift that happened.
One of the questions I have, and either one of you can answer or both, but Yellowknife has a pretty active farmers market. Some of the communities have something, some of the communities don't. And so if you're in a community where you don't have a really active farmers market where you can show up with your stuff and show people what you're doing, and then they get introduced to it, do you have any thoughts or other suggestions for people to sell?
Well, I noticed here in town, in Fort Smith, many people sell online. Like, be it many, I think they are students, college students actually, that need a little bit buck on the side. So, life is expensive with small kids, so they cook and they make supper for I don't know how many people, but they have a good business going. Many do sell bread online. It's all online nowadays, actually. Farmers market here in Smith is not that great anymore, or not that, not that many people are coming anymore like it used to be in the beginning. So most people sell online.
Yeah, Facebook is quite active.
Yeah.
Amazing how many people are selling food through Facebook.
I'll just mention one of the programs at the Yellowknife Farmers Market is the Harvesters Table. So it's essentially just a table where people can bring their surplus vegetables. So if you have 3 extra zucchinis that you cannot convince any member of your family to eat, and you got too much lettuce, you can just drop it off at this table, and the farmers market will sell it on your behalf. But in in an instance when there's no farmer's market, that kind of table can still happen. I sold 1 year during COVID for a few weeks, all by myself at a table in front of City Hall. And, people came, you advertise on social media. And I said, I'll be there as long as I got stuff. And it did, because we don't want waste. So there's so many ways to sell. I started the online store mainly with the thought of during COVID that this was because I think we found out 2 weeks before the beginning of the farmers market that we could have a farmers market. So, everybody had these huge gardens and ready to grow food, but like who's going to buy this? So it was a very quick decision, and so started the online store. And for the first 2 years, I was selling more through the online store than at the farmers market, because the farmers market was very small. We had like a quarter or a third of the normal vendors.
Oh, wow.
But by the third year, I was back to selling more at the farmers market than online. So yeah, so that's and yeah, people were not encouraged to spend a lot of time at the farmers market. People were encouraged to shop and then go, and they were at first counting people, and like this was, like we never experienced something like that. But for me, from a business point of view, it was an impetus to start the online store, which was in the back of my mind for later. But, there was some very touching stories, like a new employer in town having just hired somebody who for 2 weeks need to stay home. So they didn't know this person, they just hired them. And so they mentioned me. So this person every day with her kids would take a walk and, every couple of days and come to get fresh vegetables in the fridge. I was her first contact with Yellowknife. So, yeah, these were different times, but I guess ultimately it shows that we need to adapt and be flexible with our business plan.
Thank you very much.
And I think, Helen, if I can just jump in here, that is also why the Taste of the North store was created, is to create another vehicle for people to get to customers. So not only locally can you bring it in and sell it through the shop, but we work with people in communities. And as you say, France, who maybe love their product, but really don't want to market. So we're bringing in some product from Hay River, from somebody who loves their product, has no interest in labeling and packaging and marketing. And so they're quite happy to just ship it up to us. We package it, we sell it for them. So they're still able to do what they love. So there's lots of creative ways that I think is really interesting. And part of our job at the TAA is to find some better supply chain routes, which means for right now, we can help cover the cost of shipping for people to bring things in from communities or send them in. So yeah, it's selling shouldn't be the stop of a great idea or hobby or business that people are wanting to do.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if we've got any questions from on the call.
There is nothing in chat that's a question.
Okay. All right. One of the, I guess,
sorry. I have a question. Yeah, sorry, didn't mean.
Okay.
Unmute button. Gosh, where did it come from? I was curious if you could speak to what was the argument you ended up using to convince the government to give you a little bit of a grant or funding, or what was the final nail on the coffin?
What I kept being told is no, because you are too small. And then they came up with some formula, some number. And so it was always meeting, rising to the challenge of what they would tell me. So, okay, you think I'm too small, but I want to expand. This would take me to this grow area. I'm also going to be using my friend's lot in town, like so demonstrating the growing potential. But that very first check that I got, I forget the exact writing on the check, but it was essentially, you're not really entitled to this, but we're giving you this because we believe in what you do. This is why I call it my shut her up money, because that's essentially what it was. And then rules kind of changed. So it can look monumental to do this kind of work, but not that long ago, it was necessary. The other big battle was because I was off grid, I was on recreational lease, and you could not have a business. And so for years, I kept asking for, give me something, a special recognition for the educational purpose of this, for food security. And it took somebody high up in the government to physically come and see that what I was doing was small scale, but had great potential. And so now there are, commercial agriculture lease in the area. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So that's what I mean. You start with growing food, and next thing you know, you're doing stickers, troubleshooting printers, starting an online thing, and figuring out appeal process for different, and yeah.
Anybody
I
have a
really,
question?
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I really think because France and Yellowknife Farmers Market, they were long before the Fort Smith Farmers Market. They really were sort of the front runners for us. They, like when we went to ITI and wanted a grant for something here, of course you get it. So we were really lucky, I guess, too. You did the
And I think it
hard
was
work.
the right timing, like the local food revolution had landed,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there were people in Yellowknife and in government that were open to that, just needed to figure out how to make it happen. Another funny thing, I keep talking about the GNWT, but when I moved into town, I'd been living off grid for 27 years. So now I had to acquire knowledge around municipal regulations and bylaw. And somebody told me that I couldn't have a greenhouse on my front lawn. And so I was in the middle, literally, of completely redoing the old house that I had bought. And so I went to the city, to the planning department, and I said, okay, the front door is now there, and I can't put a greenhouse by the front door, right? And they said, yeah. And I said, if I move the front door and I put it elsewhere, so the front becomes the side, right? They said, yeah. I said, to the
Unreal.
contractor, the front door is now going there. Like we were in the midst of renovating. But it was like, oh my God. And for me, I was rolling my eyes because I thought I had left all of that for the security and the safety of being within the boundaries of a city. But yeah, and now they've changed all of that, and yeah.
Is there anyone that wants to unmute themselves to ask a question?
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was driving, so I didn't get to see the face of the person who was talking when cheese was being discussed. So whoever it is that's making cheese, are you making cheese with rennet or culture, or are you making like a cooked cheese, like more of a fior di latte or a like a bocconcini style cheese? And if you are making it with rennet or culture, where are you getting that from?
It was me, France. I make soft cheeses with rennet and culture. There's a place in Ontario called Glengarry Cheese Making, and this is from where that I order from. There's in the sense that it's a specialized cheese making place, so I can buy larger quantities of items. But you can just go online, and there's a few stores in Edmonton that can ship you rennet and culture, but in very small quantities. Like I use that in less than a month. So I ordered from Glengarry Cheesemaking, and they have a flat shipping rate. There's another place in Quebec, but they insist on shipping everything through FedEx, so it's way too expensive. But Glengarry Cheesemaking is where I order everything from.
Okay. And are you finding like it's consistent? It works every time? Like when we tried making our own cheeses, we got rennet from, like I'm in Ontario, and had a relationship with a Mennonite farmer. We were able to get some rennet from him. And we found that we weren't exactly experts, but it didn't work every time. We didn't get consistent results.
Yeah, no, um I've had consistent results. I only make soft cheeses, four different kinds: mascarpone, ricotta, cream cheese, goat cheese, and feta, which is my big seller. So that's what I do, and I try to come up with dishes that uses the cheese. Um, it's artisan cheese making, so sometimes I get a better production than other times. It depends on temperature in the house and stuff like that. But I think it's important to get good commercial rennet and culture. The rennet I leave and chloride calcium as well because I use store-bought
Awesome.
milk. I don't have animals. And the culture I freeze because it does go out of date.
Mhm.
So I freeze it in the freezer, and then it can last for years.
Okay. That's very interesting. Thanks.
No problem.
That actually leads to a question from me. So asking about where to get a supply as essential to your business as that, how do you find it is finding the suppliers, like the jars, the containers, are you finding that that's a really expensive, difficult thing to do? And if it is, do you think that like having a central supply in the north would be better, or do you like the freedom to just pick and choose? What are your thoughts on containers, I guess, and supplies?
For myself, I can get jars, lids, and the rings here in town, but they are, of course, much more expensive than down south, or at least used to be. The price nowadays is almost the same. But we were just out of down south, so I got it there. And also the other stuff like the sugar and all the stuff I need for it. So
I I buy local in terms of food and stuff like that. I'll bring back when I go to Quebec some bulk spices, good quality, larger volume. But basically, in terms of the food supplies, jars I buy from Canadian Tire, 40, 60 trays at a time, and manage to find room for them in the house. The the where I ran into some issues is compostable bags to use and foil containers. Depending, it's worth making a few phone calls to find out about prices of different things. And I try not to buy from the States for obvious reasons. But sometimes if it's more expensive in town, if you don't have to pay for the shipping, then that's still, worth it. So what I have found in the last few years is I found another supplier of compostable bags. The farmers market in Yellowknife, we have this rule that all packaging needs to be compostable, not just biodegradable, but fully certified compostable. And no small packs of soya sauce and ketchup, like big bottles and so on. So we have a great waste reduction program at the market. So compostable bags is something that I like to do. But what I found in the last, I would say 2-3 years, is suppliers now insist on using a private courier versus Canada Post. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay $100 to get the bags shipped to me. And what I've started to do in the last year, I found another supplier for compostable things. They happen to be in Montreal. So I called them and I said, this is who I am. And, I want to buy from you. But can you ship it to me through Canada Post? And I said, I'm looking for a supplier. And they agreed. And then I went on and I said, well, I don't really want to buy 2,000 bags. Can you ship me 500? And this supplier agreed. And sometimes, so I just put in an order again with them a few weeks ago. And same thing, they still agreed to do it. Some other companies flatly refuse and are at times even mean about it. So, I say, listen, I'm from Yellowknife. I want you as my supplier. Help me, meet me halfway, I don't need it here shipped FedEx. I'm ordering well ahead of time. I can wait. Yeah. And then to the point it was ridiculous. This was for another item, but found a supplier and he said, well, now I'm going to have to ask an employee to take her car, go to the post office, get a quote, come back, call you to get your permission. I said, no, the website. You know the weight of the product that you're selling. Oh, So we agreed it was going to be like $60. And I said, I'm authorizing you 100. Just ship the thing through Canada Post. And, and often what I hear is, but we can't make an exception for you. And as a business person, very often I reply, I know, but I make exceptions in the way I run my business. I have some elderly clients who've given me their credit card. They can't figure out online shopping. So they call me and yeah, no problem, So it is a bit bothersome for me. But hey, I've got a sale and I want to treat this lady like I want people to treat my mother, So I make exception as well as, as a vendor. So when they tell me, well, we can't make an exception for you, I'm like, well, anyway, that's been my pet peeve the last year.
Helena, there's also a question in chat. Thank you, France and Gabby. The question is from Kayla. Do you have issues with tourism or a larger demand, excuse me, during tourism season and keeping up? And I feel very privileged in asking this question because I am the one that is always hounding the people for more product. That you both have said that you want to keep your business small enough that you're enjoying it. I appreciate that, value that. We have a tremendous demand that we are just not meeting. So I love this question because it's the demand is far greater than the supply, but this is specifically with tourism or tourism season.
Mhm.
For myself, no. I pretty much sell the same amount every summer. No, I can't say I sell more during tourist season.
Mm.
There is not much tourism going on here anyways. Unless there is the music festival or something like that, but no, not really.
Sort of the same here, Gabby, for me. We certainly have, more tourists coming than you. Tourists, I don't know how it's going to be this year with the States, but a lot of tourists are also family members from people from Yellowknife, who come at the table and, they normally come alone and now there's 5 of them, here's my mom, here's my sister, like all of this. Very often people come in their RV vehicles. And so they've got very limited fridge and freezer space. I only have 1 or 2 products that are sealed, that are shelf stable. The rest is all fresh, done every week. So sometimes they will buy things, and you can tell who is a tourist and so on. So also some people making their way through Yellowknife to work up north, and so they're in a hotel room, so they can't really have a lot of things unless it's something that they can eat right away. So that's but in terms, I can't say that I make things for tourism in mind, because that's not my clientele as such. That is not to say that tourists don't buy my products, but I think because a lot of them are not sealed, then there's less potential for tourists to bring back things. Yeah.
So I can just jump in here with a little bit from the store, depending on the product. So, for example, in the winter months with the Aurora tourists, we get like 10,000 tourists a month coming through Yellowknife. Actually, it's 20,000, but I didn't want to say that because it sounds too many. But we get that many coming through in a month. And so one of our businesses, so Bullock's, has their wonderful sauce in regular sauce size bottles. And this year they made them in little mini bottles for tourists that could go into their suitcase that they would want to go. We couldn't keep them in stock. They were flying off the shelves because the tourists want little things that they could take with them. We have 3 different coffee roasters in the NWT, and they all produce big bags. And we're constantly going, can you somebody please make a small souvenir bag? Because so many of the tourists want to take home a coffee from the north, and there's nothing in a small enough package. So, and then even jams, we sell a lot of jams to tourists if they're made with local berries, or the dandelion jam was the best, but anything like that. But they like the little mini jars, not the regular full-size jam jars. So in our experience, the tourists have tremendous demand, and they're willing to spend the money. I mean, literally never question the price. And on some of the things, we think they should be questioning the price. But it's the smaller size items or the really unique items that they are buying.
Okay.
Okay.
Note to file.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the small ones, though, would they take something that's 125 mil, or is that too big?
They would
What's
take
the
it.
limit? What's the limit? Is it 100 mil or 125?
It's 100 mils for the plane, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's the business travelers that typically are only traveling with carry-on, but like the Aurora travelers, the family travelers, they typically have suitcases, just not a lot of room in their suitcases.
Yeah.
125 is about what they take. Like they're taking gifts back for family and friends. So 125 is fine, but like they don't want to take a one giant thing as a gift when they could have smaller ones.
Okay. Any last questions? Well, thank you very much, France and Gabby. This was a really interesting conversation, and I actually took some notes because I was like, ooh, things I got to follow up on. So
Thanks for having me.
this was
Yes.
Nice.
like,
Nice meeting you, Gabby.
yeah.
Nice meeting you too, France.
Thank you, Helena, for putting this together. I think it should hopefully be the start in a series of storyteller sessions that we will be seeing, although I haven't mentioned that at all to Helena. I'm just fingers crossed. As you get to know some of the growers and producers and harvesters across the territory. Amy wasn't able to join us tonight due to a family emergency, but we did have no gaps, which means that it was wonderful to have both France and Gabby and Helena, who was driving the bus as we move forward. So thank you all for joining. Follow us on Instagram or on our website.
Farmers Market, June 3rd.
Oh, wow, already.
Wow.
Woo, tell me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And-
Lots of new vendors this year. Great food.
Great.
Well, that's good to
Wonderful.
hear.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.